welcome. Dear dreamer and good evening. You've found your way to Whispers of the Night, where stories drift softly through twilight, and every word is meant to carry you gently toward rest. Before we begin tonight's tale, take a moment to settle in. Find a comfortable place. Let your body sink into stillness. Breathe in deeply through your nose and exhale softly through your mouth. As you do, imagine the world around you slowing down. The air becomes hushed, like a soft lullaby before dawn. Outside your window, night and morning hold hands for a brief, beautiful moment. If you're new here, welcome to our sleepy corner of the world. And if you've drifted with us before, welcome back, dear friend. Your dreams have been waiting. Before we begin, don't forget to tap subscribe to Whispers of the Night so you can return here anytime you need peace, calm, and a story to help you fall asleep each night. We bring you tales woven from stars and science, from fairy tales and forgotten worlds. Each story is a key, opening the quiet door to dreams. Tonight's story is a gentle retelling of a timeless fairy tale, a story of light, freedom, and the morning that follows every night. This is Rapunzel, a soothing fairy tale, classic tale for insomnia. So whenever you're ready, close your eyes and let the world outside fade away. Now let's allow your body to drift into comfort, a slow descent into the gentlest kind of stillness. Take a deep breath and hold it for just a heartbeat and release it. Slowly feel the weight of your day slipping away. Every thought, every sound, every little worry softly unwinding like silk threads in the quiet air. Imagine you are standing at the top of a tower, not as a prisoner, but as a dreamer, watching the stars fade into morning. The stones beneath your feet are cool, the air tender with dawn. You hear the whisper of leaves, the distant hum of a river, and the faint golden hush of sunlight rising beyond the hills. With every breath, you become lighter, as if your body were slowly dissolving into the air around you. Your chest softens, your shoulders sink, your hands grow still and warm. You are safe, you are loved, and the world can wait until morning now. Imagine that same light, gentle, golden, and slow, touching the edges of your mind. It moves like a sigh through your thoughts, turning them soft and quiet, as if each one were falling asleep too. You are drifting now, somewhere between waking and dreaming, in the place where Rapunzel once watched her lanterns rise. Those lights float upward, carrying every bit of worry and noise far, far away. Let your breath become slower in and out. Each exhale, a release. Each inhale, a renewal. If thoughts come, let them pass like clouds over a still sky. Nothing to change, nothing to fix, just the rhythm of your breath and the feeling of peace unfolding within you. Soon, we will begin our story, but for now, simply rest here. In this quiet tower between night and dawn, a soft light glows around you. A gentle voice will guide you, and all you need to do is listen and drift. Rapunzel, a soothing fairy tale. The Tower of Golden Dreams. In a quiet valley surrounded by mist and wildflowers, there stood a tower so tall it seemed to breathe the same air as the clouds. Its stones were old and sun-warmed, each one holding the echo of 100 mornings and the hush of countless dusks. Vines climbed along its walls in soft green ribbons, and wild roses bloomed at its base, filling the air with a sweetness that drifted lazily through the days. At the heart of this gentle solitude lived a young woman named Rapunzel. Her hair, golden as honey in the morning light, flowed like threads of sunlight down the tower's winding stairs. She had lived there for as long as she could remember, high above the earth, high above the world. Her only companions were the whisper of the wind through the window and the gentle flutter of birds who dared to come close. Every morning, she would wake with the first blush of dawn. When the valley still dreamed beneath its blanket of fog, she would open the shutters of her little round window and breathe in the scent of dew and earth. Below her, the meadow stretched like a living painting, soft green and glistening. She loved to watch how the mist moved, swirling and fading as the sun rose higher, revealing the distant hills that cradled her world. But it was during the quiet hours between day and night that her heart truly stirred, when the world outside her tower began to glow with the fading gold of sunset. She would climb to the highest balcony, clutching a lantern of her own making, a small glass globe painted with stars. She would light its candle, hold it close, and gaze at the horizon where, one by one, lanterns began to rise into the darkening sky. They were not from her valish, she knew that much. Somewhere beyond the woods and rivers, beyond the hills she had never seen, people released those floating lights into the night. They drifted like golden dreams, hundreds of them, glowing softly as they sailed upward. Rapunzel would watch them every evening, her heart aching with a longing she could never quite name. She would whisper to herself, "They're so far away, yet they feel like they're calling," in the quiet of her tower. Rapunzel found ways to keep the world close. Even if she could not touch it, she painted. Her walls were covered in her dreams' fields of lavender she had never walked through, oceans she had only imagined from books, cities that gleamed like starlight on the water. Her paintbrush was her voice, her colors, her songs. She painted the stories she told herself. Stories of the world beyond her window sometimes. When the afternoon light turned golden and sleepy, she would sit by her window ledge with a cup of tea and hum songs without words. The birds often perched nearby to listen, tilting their heads curiously, as if they understood her gentle melodies. And for a while, she felt less alone. The tower itself had become a part of Hert's winding staircase, the gentle creak of its wooden floors, the hum of air through its stone walls. It was both her cage and her comfort. The woman who had raised her, an older woman with eyes that always seemed to watch more than they spoke, visited from time to time, bringing baskets of food and supplies. She called herself Mother Gothel. She spoke softly, smiled rarely, and left quickly. Rapunzel knew not to ask questions. Questions only brought silence, but still, curiosity bloomed like wildflowers in her heart. Every book she read, every story she painted, every lantern that drifted through the sky became a seed of wonder. What lay beyond the trees? Who lit the lanterns? Why did their glow make her heart feel so heavy and light all at once? On nights when the stars were bright and the wind was still, Rapunzel would dream she was floating among those lanterns. In her dreams, she could feel the cool rush of the air, smell the sea salt of distant shores, hear the laughter of unseen people gathered together beneath the sky. Each dream ended the same way, her hand reaching out toward one lantern that glowed brighter than all the rest, only for it to fade just as she touched it. When morning came, she would wake with tears on her cheeks and a smile on her lips. Days passed like soft echoes in that valley quiet, measured, timeless. The rhythm of her life was the rhythm of nature itself, the bird's song, the wind's sigh, the season's turn. In spring, the flowers bloomed so thick that the air seemed painted in color. In summer, the grass sang beneath the bees' hum. Autumn came with the scent of wood smoke and the slow fall of golden leaves that clung to her window. And in winter, snow blanketed the tower's roof, and silence became her dearest friend. Rapunzel often wondered if the world had forgotten her or if it was waiting. The thought didn't make her sad. It made her curious, for she believed deep down that there was a rhythm to every life, a calling that found you when the time was right. Maybe, she thought, the lanterns were hers, the world's way of calling her home, softly, patiently, like the whisper of a mother to a sleeping child. One afternoon, after painting for hours, she stepped back from her canvas and saw something she hadn't noticed before. In the reflection of her work, a wide river, painted in shades of blue and gold. She had unknowingly painted a figure on the far bank, a silhouette, small and distant, holding a lantern. It glowed faintly in her painting, brighter than the moon she'd brushed above. She didn't remember painting it, but there it was, a stranger in her dream world. Her heart gave a quiet flutter. She reached out, touched the painted light with her fingertips, and whispered, "Who are you?" Of course, the painting did not answer, but that night, when she looked out her window, one lantern among the hundreds seemed to drift closer than the rest. It moved differently, slower, like it had chosen her. Rapunzel held her breath. The candlelight flickered across her face, reflecting in her eyes like twin stars. For a moment, the distance between her world and the one beyond seemed to disappear. The lantern floated nearer until it hung above the treetops, its glow warm and steady. Then, softly, it began to rise again, joining the others until all of them were lost in the deep velvet sky. She watched until the last light faded. Then she turned back inside, heart full. The silence around her trembling with unspoken dreams. She didn't know it yet, but that was the night something inside her began to change. It was small, like the first crack of dawn behind the hills, but it was there. A quiet pull, a sense that her tower, beautiful as it was, could no longer hold everything her heart had become. She looked at her brushes, her books, her painted worlds, felt gratitude, not sorrow. They had kept her company, but now she longed to see the colors of the real world, to hear voices other than her own, to walk paths that led somewhere. And yet she waited, because that is what dreamers do. They wait, not out of fear, but out of a kind of trust that the world will open when the time is right. As the moon rose high, painting her room in silver light, Rapunzel sat beside her window and began a new painting. This one was different. It was not of rivers or skies or imagined cities. It was a simple picture, a single floating lantern reflected in her eyes. Around it, she painted soft golden threads that stretched beyond the frame, as though reaching for something unseen. By the time she finished, the candle in her lantern had burned low. The world outside was quiet, except for the rustle of the wind through the tall grass below. She leaned her head against the cool stone and closed her eyes. The scent of roses drifted upward, and somewhere in the distance, another lantern began its slow ascent. Rapunzel smiled faintly in her sleep. She didn't see how the valley shimmered faintly under that glow. She didn't see how, far away, in a kingdom across the forest, the same golden lights were rising again, each one carrying a silent wish into the night. But she dreamed of them, as she always did, and in her dreams, she wasn't in the tower anymore. She was walking barefoot through fields of lanterns, each one gently brushing her hands as it passed, each one whispering the same thing, "Come home." The lanterns of longing. Evening came softly to the valley, as it always did first, with a cool sigh of wind through the meadows. Then, with the hush of wings, as birds sought their nests. The tower's long shadow stretched across the grass, a slender mark of gold fading into violet dusk. Inside, the air shimmered faintly with candlelight, and the faint sound of a brush moving through hair echoed through the round stone chamber. Rapunzel sat before her mirror, her golden hair spilling around her like a river caught in twilight. Each stroke of her brush was slow and patient, a rhythm that matched the beating of her heart and the quiet whisper of the world outside. She hummed softly as she brushed an old tune, one she could never remember learning. It was the kind of melody that seemed to come from the air itself, the kind that felt older than memory. The song rose and fell like a tide. Its notes filled the room, mingling with the evening breeze that drifted through the open window. The wind played gently with the ends of her hair, lifting a few golden strands into the fading light. Outside, the first lanterns were beginning to appear as small, glowing hearts that floated up into the sky one by one. Rapunzel paused in her brushing. The sound of her humming faded as her eyes found the horizon. The lanterns had become her companions, her secret clock, her only measure of passing time. They told her when it was night, when it was a special evening, when the world beyond her tower stirred with celebration. Sometimes she wondered if those who released them knew she was watching. The sky deepened, turning from rose to indigo. The lanterns grew brighter, their light trembling gently like breath on glass. She leaned on the windowsill, her brush still in her hand, her gaze lost in the drifting glow. "They look so close tonight," she murmured to herself. "So close I could almost reach them." Her voice was soft, like a secret spoken to the air. Below her, the meadow swayed, dark and fragrant. Fireflies answered the lanterns with their tiny golden sparks, and the world seemed to breathe in rhythm light, dark like the slow beating of a dreamer's heart. Rapunzel closed her eyes. She could almost hear the lanterns hum. It was not a sound in the usual sense, but something gentler, vibration that lived in her chest, a warmth that spread through her as she watched them drift higher. It felt like the world was singing to her in a language she didn't yet understand. Each night she tried to paint them. She would sit by candlelight, her brushes laid out before her, an attempt to capture that glow, the way the light moved, the way it softened the edges of darkness. But no matter how many shades of gold she mixed, she could never quite find it. One evening, after many attempts, she gave up painting and simply sat at her window. "Perhaps they can't be painted," she whispered. "Perhaps they're not meant to be caught." The thought didn't sadden her. Instead, it made her smile, a small, wistful smile that reached her eyes. The lanterns, she thought, were alive in their own way. Each one carried something invisible: hope, a wish, maybe a memory, and it was that unseen thing that made them shine as the night deepened. The lanterns grew in number until the sky seemed filled with drifting stars. They rose from beyond the forest, far past her sight, yet their pattern never wavered. She had learned their rhythm over the years. The first few always came early, timid and solitary. Then, as the hour turned, hundreds followed, glowing softly, moving as if they shared a single breath. On some nights, when the air was especially still, one would wander closer than the rest, as though drawn by her quiet presence. Those were the nights she cherished most. She would press her hands to the windowsill and lean forward, her heart trembling with the delicate ache of wonder. "Come closer," she would whisper, "just a little closer," and for a moment it would. The lantern would seem to pause in its journey, caught on some invisible current. Its light would flicker across her face, turning her eyes into tiny reflections of gold. She would feel its warmth, imagined, perhaps, but real to her. Then, gently, it would drift away again, continuing its slow climb toward the stars. She always watched until the last light disappeared. Only then would she turn from the window and move through her tower, her steps slow and unhurried. The glow of the lanterns would linger in her mind long after the candles had been extinguished. Sometimes she would dream that they had voices, soft, distant voices calling through the night. Sometimes they whispered her name when she woke from those dreams. Her cheeks were damp, but her heart felt strangely lighter. She didn't know why, but the sound of her own name, in the dark, imagined or not, felt like a promise. Days passed gently, as they always did. The seasons touched the valley with their quiet hand, spring with its perfume, summer with its warmth, autumn with its hush. But the lanterns remained unchanged, a rhythm untouched by time. Rapunzel often thought that maybe the world beyond her tower did not change at all. Maybe it, too, lived in a circle of repeating nights and endless lights. It comforted her to believe that somewhere, people were gathering beneath the same sky, lighting their lanterns and looking upward. She liked to imagine their faces, children holding hands, mothers smiling softly, fathers lighting flames with steady care. She imagined music in the distance, laughter carried by the wind. And though she had never heard such sounds before, she could almost feel them in the rhythm of her heart. One night, as the lanterns began to rise, she felt a sudden impulse. Setting her brush aside, she took one of her empty glass jars from the shelf and tied a piece of silk ribbon around its neck. Then she lit a small candle inside and held it up to her window. The little flame flickered uncertainly. For a moment, she imagined what it would be like to let it go, to see it float upward, joining the hundreds beyond her reach. But she did not. She only held it there, her arms resting on the sill, and whispered, "If only you could tell them I'm watching." The candle flickered once, twice, then steadied. Its small reflection shone in her eyes. She smiled. "That's all right," she said softly. "You can keep the secret." The world outside grew quiet again. The lanterns drifted higher, their glow fading into the stars. Soon, there was only the whisper of the wind and the faint scent of wildflowers through the window. Rapunzel stayed there for a long while, her chin resting on her arms, her thoughts adrift. She thought about how light could travel so far, how it could cross forests and rivers and still burn steady against the night. She wondered if longing was the same something that traveled unseen from one heart to another. Her own longing, she thought, might be carried on the air just as the lanterns were. Maybe, somewhere beyond the valley, someone felt it's someone who looked at the same sky and wondered who might be watching from afar. It was a sweet thought, gentle and impossible. She held it close when the hour grew late. She braided her hair and lay down beneath the slanted ceiling of her little chamber. Moonlight poured through the window, falling in silver ribbons across the floor. Her walls glimmered faintly with all the golden tones of her paintings. She liked how they shimmered differently at night, softer, quieter, as if they, too, were dreaming. Before she closed her eyes, she whispered a wish. She did not speak it aloud, for she believed wishes were delicate things, easily frightened by sound. She only pressed it against her heart and let it drift upward with the last of the lanterns. Sleep came gently, as it often did. In her dreams, the tower dissolved into mist, and she found herself standing in an open field beneath a sky of endless lanterns. They floated so low she could reach them. Each one brushed her fingertips like a heartbeat. She gathered them one by one, holding their fragile light close, and as she turned, she saw something in the distance, a faint glow that pulsed with warmth, steady and bright. It wasn't a lantern, it was something different, something alive. She took a step toward it, then another. The grass whispered beneath her feet, and the air grew soft with gold. She reached out her hand. Just before she touched it, she woke. The morning light poured through her window, pale and new. The world was quiet again, untouched and peaceful. But in her chest, the echo of her dream lingered, a faint warmth, like a promise that had not yet faded. She rose and brushed her hair in silence. Outside, the mist lifted slowly from the valley, revealing the bright wildflowers that nodded in the breeze. Everything was as it had been, and yet something inside her had shifted gently, invisibly, like the first turn of a key in a lock, long forgotten. The lanterns still called to her, and though she did not yet understand what they meant, she felt their song more deeply than ever. They were not just lights in the distance. Anymore, they were a lullaby, a guide, a promise whispered through the air. Someday, a visitor beneath the window. The day had been peaceful in its usual way. The sun drifted lazily across a sky brushed with the faintest clouds, and the valley below shimmered with late summer warmth. Bees hummed around the wildflowers that carpeted the meadow. and somewhere far beyond the trees, a brook sang its quiet tune. Rapunzel spent her afternoon painting. The tower smelled faintly of oil and wild honey, and streaks of color shone across her hands. She was trying to capture the light that came just before evening, the golden hush that wrapped itself around the world like silk. Her brush moved carefully across the canvas, each stroke delicate, deliberate, as though she feared to break the stillness that surrounded her. When the last touch of sunlight dipped below the hills, she set her brush aside and stretched. The tower creaked softly beneath her bare feet, the old wood murmuring like a sleepy companion. Outside, the first stars began to appear, and with them the familiar, fluttering anticipation that always filled her when night approached. She lit her little lantern and went to the window, the cool air kissing her cheeks. The sky deepened to indigo, and there, faint but certain, the first golden lights began to rise. Rapunzel smiled. Her world felt smaller by day, but when the lanterns came, everything grew wider. The valley seemed to breathe. The air shimmered with unspoken magic. She leaned against the stone frame, resting her chin on her arms, her long hair falling like a curtain of light down the side of the tower. She began to hum, softly, the same tune that had kept her company since childhood. It was a song she didn't remember learning, one that felt as old as the wind. Her voice was quiet, barely louder than a whisper, but in the stillness of the evening, it filled the space gently, like a candle's glow filling a darkened room. The lanterns drifted higher. She watched their reflection in her eyes, her humming a lullaby for herself and the night alike. And then somewhere beneath the tower, another sound joined her song. At first, it was faint, so faint she thought it might have been a trick of the wind. But no, the sound came again, low and warm, rising gently through the air like smoke from a fire. It was a voice, a human voice. Rapunzel froze. The brush of her breath caught in her throat. For a long moment, she simply listened. The voice sang not in words she knew, but with a melody that felt strangely familiar. It wound around her own tune, soft yet sure, as though answering the song she had always sung alone. She leaned closer to the window, the cool stone pressing against her skin. The sound came from the meadow below. Somewhere among the wildflowers, someone was singing to the stars. Her heart began to race, not with fear, but with wonder. She had never heard another voice so near her tower knot in all her years. The only footsteps that ever approached belonged to Mother Gothel, and hers were always quiet, measured, businesslike. This song was different. It was free. She waited until the last note faded into the night, then called softly, "Hello." Her voice trembled at first, uncertain from lack of use. The echo of it floated down the tower and disappeared into the dark. There was a pause so long that she began to wonder if she had imagined it, all before a reply came, light and curious. "Hello." The single word carried upward like a spark, small and bright. Rapunzel's pulse fluttered. She asked, leaning forward just enough to see the shadow of a figure below. Moonlight brushed the outline of a young man standing in the meadow, his head tilted upward toward her window. For a moment, the world seemed to still. The air, the lanterns, even the night breezel held their breath. The stranger stepped into a patch of soft light. He wore a travel-worn cloak and carried a lute slung across his back. His hair caught the faint shimmer of starlight, and his eyes, though distant, seemed kind. He smiled, uncertain but sincere. "I didn't mean to startle you," he called softly. "I was following the lanterns. I thought I heard someone humming, so I sang along." Rapunzel's lips parted, though no words came immediately. Her world had been filled with silence for so long that the sound of another's voice felt like sunlight after endless rain. "You sang beautifully," she said at last, her tone hushed, reverent. "I thought I was alone here." He laughed, quietly, a warm, easy sound that drifted upward and melted into the night air. "So did I," he replied, "until I heard your song." Rapunzel smiled, though she didn't realize it. Her hand rested lightly on the stone frame. "You're a traveler," he nodded. "A minstrel, mostly. I wander from town to town. I saw the lanterns and thought there must be a celebration nearby." He paused, looking up with curious awe. "But then I saw this tower and your light." Rapunzel followed his gaze toward her small lantern by the window. Its flame flickered faintly, reflected in her eyes. "It's just a candle," she said softly. "I light it every night." The minstrel tilted his head. "Then it's the most patient candle I've ever seen." She laughed, quiet, surprised laugh that startled even her. The sound seemed strange and lovely in her own ears, like something newly discovered. They spoke a little more, their voices weaving through the night like twin threads of silk. She told him her name, shyly at first. He told her his Eliasand, how he had crossed forests and rivers, following the trail of the lanterns that filled the skies each year. "It's said," he told her softly, "that the lanterns are released in memory of the lost princess, the one taken from her family long ago." Rapunzel's heart skipped. "Lost," she echoed, her voice barely audible. He nodded. "Each year, they light lanterns to guide her home. They say that when the sky is full of gold, she'll see them and remember who she is." The words sank deep into her. She looked toward the horizon, where hundreds of lanterns floated like golden stars. They had always filled her with longing, but she had never known why. Now that longing had a shape, a story. Elias adjusted his lute strap and smiled gently. "I didn't mean to disturb your evening," he said. "I should go before the mist thickens." But he hesitated. "May I come back tomorrow night, perhaps, just to sing again?" Rapunzel felt something inside her unfold, slow and quiet. She nodded. "Yes," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Please." He bowed slightly, almost playfully. "Then I'll follow the lanterns back to you." And with that, he turned and began to walk down the slope, his shadow melting into the silver grass. Rapunzel watched until he disappeared among the trees, her hand still resting on the window frame, her heart full of something she had no name for. When the last of his song faded, she stayed by the window, listening to the silence he left behind. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It was softer, now alive with echoes. That night, sleep did not come easily. She lay beneath the moonlight, her hair spread around her like threads of gold, her eyes tracing patterns across the ceiling. The tower, once so still, seemed to hum faintly as if it, too, had heard the stranger's song and remembered what it was to feel alive. She thought of his voice, of the way the music had carried through the air like a bridge between their worlds. She thought of the story he had told of a lost princess and the lanterns that called her home. Could such a tale be true? She turned toward her window. The lanterns had almost faded, their glow faint and far away. But in her heart they burned brighter than ever. Rapunzel rose quietly, unable to rest. She lit her candle again and stood before one of her unfinished paintings. Picking up her brush, she began to paint the figure of a man standing beneath her tower, his hand tilted upward, his hand resting on a lute. Around him, the meadow glowed with soft lantern light. She painted until the first blush of dawn appeared over the hills. When the final brushstroke was done, she stepped back and gazed at the picture. The colors shimmered faintly in the early light, alive with warmth and mystery. For the first time, her tower did not feel like the whole world. It felt like a beginning, she whispered to the morning air. Tomorrow night. And as the valley awoke with the first notes of birdsong, Rapunzel smiled a soft, secret smile meant only for the rising sun. Far below, the dew on the grass caught the light, glittering like tiny lanterns waiting to be lifted once more. The day would pass, gentle and familiar, but in the quiet place between heartbeats, Rapunzel would carry the echo of that stranger's song, the melody that had crossed the distance between solitude and the start of something new. The world beyond her tower no longer seemed so far away. It was waiting just beyond the window, just beneath the stars, and for the first time she could feel it calling her name. A journey beyond the tower. The tower had always been the whole of Rapunzel's world. Its stone walls, her mountains, its window, her horizon. Now, for the first time, she stood upon the soft, breathing earth. Beneath her bare feet, the soil was cool and damp with evening dew. The grass bent gently under her steps, as though the earth itself bowed in welcome. Above, the sky opened wide, a vast sea of stars that shimmered like paint upon dark silk. The moon hung low, a silver lantern among the branches. Rapunzel tilted her face toward it, her hair glinting like a thread of gold, catching the night wind. "Is it always this big?" she whispered. The traveler, the one whose song had reached her window, smiled, his voice low and calm. "The world?" he asked. "It's as big as your heart allows it to be." She thought about that, her eyes tracing the horizon where the land folded softly into mist. In her tower, distance had been a dream, a thing she could only paint or imagine. Now, each step was a brushstroke in motion, each sound a melody she had never heard before. They walked slowly, as though afraid to disturb the sleeping world. The forest around them rustled like whispered prayer. Trees rose tall and silent, their leaves glimmering with moonlight. The air smelled of pine and distant rain. Somewhere nearby, a stream sang quietly to itself, the notes mingling with the hum of crickets. Rapunzel reached out, brushing her fingers against the rough bark of an old oak. The sensation startled her, so textured, so real. "Everything feels alive," she murmured. "It is," said the traveler, "and it always has been. You were just waiting to meet it." A hush settled between them, not heavy, but comfortable, a space filled with breath and wonder. The rhythm of their steps fell into the rhythm of the world itself, a quiet pulse, a heartbeat shared between two souls and the earth beneath them. The night deepened as they followed the river. Its surface gleamed like a ribbon of light, reflecting stars that seemed close enough to touch. Fireflies drifted above the water, flickering in soft patterns that reminded her of the lanterns she once watched from her window. She stopped, gazing at their glow. "They're smaller," she said softly, "but they shine the same way. Lanterns or fireflies, it finds its way through darkness, even the smallest spark." She smiled at that. For the first time, her smile wasn't painted or imagined. It was real, fragile, and luminous, born from the stillness of the moment. They came to a small clearing where wildflowers grew, not the ones she used to paint, but untamed blooms that leaned toward the moonlight. She knelt among them, her hair falling like a golden river around her. She touched a petal, pale and trembling with dew. "They're not perfect," she said. "No," he answered. "That's what makes them beautiful." For a while, they stayed there in silence, listening to the night breathe. The forest was alive with small sounds, an owl's distant call, the rustle of unseen creatures, the sigh of leaves stirred by the gentlest wind. It was music made of life itself. Rapunzel closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. The world did not feel frightening. It felt familiar, as though she had always known it, but had forgotten for a long time. When she opened her eyes again, the traveler was watching her with quiet curiosity. "You were never afraid to leave," he said, "only waiting for the right moment." "Maybe," she whispered, "maybe I was waiting for the world to call my name." They continued on, crossing a small bridge of stones where the river narrowed. The water whispered against their ankles, cool and clear. Rapunzel paused, watching the moon shimmer in the ripples. "Everything moves," she said thoughtfully. "Even the light. Even dreams," he said. Their voices mingled softly, as though part of the wind. The forest began to thin as they walked. Beyond the trees lay an open meadow, washed in silver light. The grass swayed gently, tall enough to brush their knees. Far in the distance, faint lanterns shimmered in a distant village, golden echoes of the lights she once adored from afar. Rapunzel felt something stir within her, a gentle ache of recognition. "They're so far away," she murmured. "Closer than they've ever been," he said. "Because now you're walking toward them." She watched the horizon, her heart quiet and full. For years, she had dreamed of freedom as something distant, a story beyond reach. But here, surrounded by night and stars, she understood that freedom wasn't loud or sudden. It was this, the soft unfolding of the world, step by step, breath by breath. They stopped beside a fallen tree and sat upon its mossy surface. The traveler drew a small piece of bread from his pack, breaking it in half and offering it to her. She hesitated, then accepted with a grateful nod. The taste was simple, earthly, the flavor of beginning as they ate. Fireflies drifted closer, gathering in gentle constellations around them. The air seemed to hum with quiet joy. Rapunzel looked up at the stars again, countless and eternal, and wondered if her tower could see her now. "Do you think it misses me?" she asked suddenly. She nodded. "Maybe," he said softly. "But some places are meant to hold our dreams until we're ready to live them." She smiled faintly, tracing patterns in the dirt with her fingertip. "Then I suppose it did its job well." A hush settled once more. The night was vast, yet it felt tender, as though the whole world was breathing with them. when they rose again, the moon had climbed high, pouring silver over the landscape. The trees glowed pale, and every blade of grass shimmered like glass. The river wound its way ahead, beckoning softly, leading them deeper into the unknown. They walked on Rapunzel's golden hair shimmered behind her like a trail of dawn, not a tether now, but a light guiding her forward. Every rustle of leaves, every whisper of wind felt like a word of welcome. She had stepped beyond her story's walls, and in the stillness of the night, the world itself seemed to whisper her name back to her. The traveler glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder," he said quietly, "if dreams change once you begin to live them?" She looked up at the stars, her eyes reflecting their soft fire. "No," she answered after a moment. "I think they just begin to breathe." And the forest breathed with them, leaves shivering, waters murmuring, starlight trembling on her hair. The path wound onward, slow and gentle, carrying them deeper into the calm embrace of the world that waited, always patient beyond the tower walls. The truth beneath the lanterns. The night had always felt like a friend to Rapunzel. Its silence was never empty. It was filled with listening things, the hum of the stars, the murmur of the wind, the quiet pulse of her own heart. But tonight, something within that stillness had changed. The air carried a sense of knowing, as though the world itself was waiting for her to understand. They had walked for hours through meadows silvered by moonlight, and the river now opened wide, flowing toward a distant valley where a town shimmered faintly. Lanterns floated above it, hundreds, maybe thousands, golden lights rising into the sky in calm procession, like prayers made visible. Rapunzel stopped in her tracks, her breath caught softly in her throat. "They're the same," she whispered, "the lanterns from my window." The traveler beside her said nothing. He only watched as her gaze softened, her eyes reflecting the golden drift of lights. They floated higher and higher, like memories returning to their source. She took a few quiet steps forward, her heart trembling with recognition she could not name. "Every year," she murmured, "on the same night, I'd watch them from my tower. I thought they were for someone else, someone lucky, someone free." The traveler's voice was gentle. "Maybe they were always meant for you." The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of jasmine and something faintly sweet, like old parchment or the pages of a book she'd never read. Her mind reached for an image that wasn't there yet, a room filled with soft light, a lullaby hummed in a woman's voice, a golden emblem carved into wood. She pressed a hand to her chest. The ache there was, not pain, it was remembering. The lanterns climbed higher, their glow turning the night sky into a sea of quiet fire. One drifted close, carried low by the wind. Its paper shimmered, painted with the crest of the kingdom, a golden sun surrounded by petals of light. Rapunzel reached out, fingers trembling as the lantern brushed against her palm. The warmth startled her. It felt alive in that moment. Something deep within her stirred a memory long asleep. A room of sunlight and laughter. A woman bending low, her hands gentle in her hair. a man's voice, steady and kind, whispering her name. Rapunzel. The name had always been hers, yet hearing it in that memory filled it with new meaning. It was not just a word, but a promise. Her eyes filled with tears, and she turned toward the traveler, her voice barely above a breath. "They were looking for me, weren't they?" All this time he nodded once, his expression soft. Every lantern was a wish, a way to call you home. The air grew very still then. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. Rapunzel's gaze returned to the lights above, thousands of tiny suns rising into the dark. Each one shimmered like a heartbeat. Each one whispered of love that never stopped searching. The traveler stepped back, his silhouette fading slightly against the glow. "Go," he said gently. "You know where to find them." For a long time, she couldn't move. The thought of returning, of walking toward the truth. But as the lanterns floated higher, their reflection rippled across the water, like a path made of stars. She took her first step, then another. The traveler's voice followed her, warm and low. "Every story begins again when it finds its home." She turned once, her golden hair catching the light. "Will I see you again?" He smiled faintly. "In all the places where dreams meet the sky." Then he was gone. Or perhaps simply part of the night again. Rapunzel walked toward the village, following the slow rhythm of her heartbeat. The river guided her like a lullaby. The lights grew closer until the world around her glowed in shades of gold and soft rose. When she reached the edge of the town, people stood along the streets, their faces lifted toward the lanterns. Laughter mingled with quiet tears, but at the heart of the square, before the castle gates, stood two figures, older, regal, and filled with a gentleness that seemed to radiate like the lanterns themselves. The king and queen Rapunzel did not yet know them as her parents, not with her mind, but her heart did. The moment she saw them, the memory inside her bloomed like dawn. She paused a few steps away, her breath trembling. The queen turned, her gaze meeting Rapunzel's across the candlelight. For an instant, time seemed to stop. The murmurs, the music, even the wind. The queen took one step forward, then another. Her eyes shimmered with tears she did not hide. Rapunzel's voice came as a whisper, "I know you." And that was all it took. The queen reached her hands trembling as they framed Rapunzel's face. No words passed between them, none were needed. The air around them glowed, golden and soft, the light of 1,000 lanterns reflecting in their eyes. Rapunzel felt warmth flood through her, not sudden or loud, but deep and certain, like the return of sunlight after a long storm. She rested her head against the queen's shoulder, her tears silent and full of wonder. The king stepped close, his hand gentle on her hair. His voice was quiet, a note of disbelief and prayer entwined. "You came home," he said. She nodded, eyes still closed. "I think I was always finding my way back." They stood there together beneath the rain of lanterns, their light mingling with the stars. Around them, the townsfolk began to hum a soft melody, an old lullaby that had once been sung to her when she was too young to remember. She did now. Every note seemed to unlock another piece of her heart. Later, when the night grew deeper and the lanterns had drifted far beyond sight, Rapunzel found herself standing on the castle balcony. The world spread out below her, rivers, forests, and the faint shimmer of her old tower, just a shadow in the distant hills. The wind played with her hair, It smelled of jasmine and home. For a long time, she watched the sky. Her thoughts were gentle. She did not think of lost years, nor of sorrow, only of light, how it travels patiently through darkness, how it always finds its way. She whispered softly. I thought freedom was out there, beyond everything, but it was here all along, waiting in the light that called me. The queen joined her then, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. Together, they watched the last of the lanterns vanish into the stars. They will still send them every year, the queen said quietly, to remind us that love doesn't end, even when it feels far away. Rapunzel smiled faintly. Then perhaps this year, I'll send one to Queen, looked at her with tender curiosity. For what will you wish? Rapunzel thought for a moment, her gaze drifting over the landscape that had once been only a dream. For all the lost ones, she said softly, so they can find their light again. The queen's hand found hers. They stood like that for a long while, wrapped in silence and golden warmth. When Rapunzel finally turned to go inside, she caught one last glimpse of the horizon, faint traces of the first morning light brushing against the clouds. The world was waking, and so was she that night. Long after the castle had fallen asleep, Rapunzel placed a single lantern by her window. Its glow flickered softly, golden and alive. She whispered a quiet thank you to the tower that had sheltered her, to the lights that had guided her, and to the voice that had first sung beneath her window. Then she let the lantern go. It rose slowly, its reflection gliding over the still water below the castle. As it drifted upward, Rapunzel watched until it became one with the stars. One last promise kept between sky and heart. The truth, she realized, was not something she had found. It had found her, gently, patiently, like light returning home. The kingdom of morning. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the horizon, as though hesitant to disturb the quiet beauty of the world below. The mountains still slept in folds of violet mist, and the rivers carried the final reflections of night-like scattered shards of starlight. Over the one silent kingdom, a soft golden glow began to bloom, tender and new, brushing against towers, leaves, and long-forgotten corners where dreams had lingered through the dark. High above the castle walls, Rapunzel stood by the balcony, her bare feet touching the cool marble floor. The wind whispered through her hair, shorter now, but still radiant in the sunlight. It glowed not with magic, but with life itself, a quiet, living warmth, born of love rather than enchantment. For a long moment, she simply breathed, as though rediscovering the rhythm of the world. The air tasted of dew and honey, and somewhere below, the first birds were waking. The night had been long. The tower, once her world, was now only a shadow behind her. She had crossed forests, faced the weight of truth, and returned home with both light and sorrow carried in her hands. And now, as dawn stretched across the fields, Rapunzel felt something she hadn't known before. Not excitement, not wonder, but peace. She looked out across the kingdom, her kingdom, where rooftops glimmered like small candles, being relit after a storm. Farmers stirred in their cottages, and the sound of a cart's wheel creaked faintly down the road. The city, which had held its breath for so long, began to exhale again. Below her, the courtyard filled with golden light, and she could see the familiar figure of her mother, the queen, walking through the garden, her hands brushing lightly against the petals of white roses. The queen's face, gentle and lined with the years of waiting, turned upward. Their eyes met across the still morning air. For the first time, there was no distance between them, no spells, no walls, only the shared silence of love remembered. Rapunzel descended the marble stairs, the sound of her steps soft as rainfall. The doors to the garden opened without effort, as if even the palace itself wished to welcome her home. The scent of roses, jasmine, and morning air filled her senses. Her mother's arms opened, trembling slightly, and Rapunzel fell into them like sunlight, finding its way through leaves. No words were spoken, none were needed. The years apart dissolved into tears and laughter that came in the same breath. When at last the queen pulled back, she brushed a stray strand of Rapunzel's hair from her face. "You look so much like the morning," she whispered, "bright and free." Rapunzel smiled. "And you, mother, like the dawn that waited for me." Behind them, the castle stirred to life. Bells rang softly, not the sharp sound of command, but the gentle kind that echoed through the heart. They rang for homecoming, for forgiveness, for love returned after long shadow. Flynn, no longer just the thief who once climbed her tower, watched from the edge of the courtyard. The morning light touched his face too, and in his eyes there was both pride and awe. When Rapunzel turned to him, they exchanged a look that carried every word they didn't need to say. It was not fairy tales happily ever after, but something quieter, the kind of happiness that feels like a sigh after tears. The king joined them soon after, his stride slow, his crown glinting faintly in the sunlight. He had grown older during the years of searching, but when he saw Rapunzel, something young and unguarded returned to his expression. He embraced her, voice low with emotion. "The sun itself could not outshine you, my child." And as he said those words, the kingdom seemed to awaken fully. Flags unfurled from towers, fountains danced, and windows opened to let in the day. The people, hearing that the lost princess had returned, filled the streets with petals and song. But Rapunzel did not seek the crowd. Her heart was full, yet quiet. She walked to the edge of the castle gardens, where a small stream ran through, reflecting the sky. She knelt beside it and touched the water, cool and clear. In that reflection, she no longer saw the frightened girl of the tower or the wanderer of the forest. She saw a woman, still gentle, but unbound. The morning air shimmered faintly, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw the glimmer of magic again. Not the false enchantment of Mother Gothel's lies, but the true magic of life itself. It flickered in the dew, in the wing of a bird. In the breath she took, she closed her eyes, whispering a quiet thanks to the stars that had watched her, to the lanterns that had once guided her, and to the dream that had not given up on her even when she had felt alone nearby. Flynn approached quietly and sat beside her. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Their silence was its own language, one born of shared danger, laughter, and gentle understanding. "Do you miss it?" he asked finally. "The tower?" Rapunzel shook her head slowly. "No, but sometimes I miss the girl who looked out of it." Flynn tilted his head, curious. "She used to dream without knowing the world," Rapunzel said softly. "Now I dream because I know it." Flynn smiled. "Then maybe that's what growing is." They sat there until the sun climbed higher, until the golden light wrapped around them like a promise. Later, as the day unfurled, the queen ordered the city gates opened wide, a symbol that no wall, no fear would ever separate them again. And in the heart of the kingdom, where once there had been sorrow and loss, a festival began. Lanterns were lit once more, not for searching, but for celebration. As night approached again, those lanterns floated into the sky, carrying light over water, over rooftops, over fields. And Rapunzel, standing beside her family and friends, watched them rise. Her eyes shone with reflection, not of longing, but of belonging. Flynn leaned close. "You know, for someone who's seen the world, you still look like the dream that started it all." She laughed, the sound soft as wind in wheat. "And you still sound like trouble. Good kind of trouble. The best kind," she said, smiling. And above them, the lanterns drifted higher, like stars remembering how to move, when the last one faded into the velvet of the sky. Rapunzel turned toward the distant hills. A single ray of moonlight rested on the horizon, a reminder that dreams never truly end. They only change their shape that night. When she finally lay in her bed, a room filled with soft drapes, painted suns, and the faint scent of lavender, she closed her eyes and felt the stillness settle around her. Her mind wandered to the tower, to the fields, to the rivers she had crossed, and the people she had met, but each image faded gently, replaced by a single thought: "I am home." Outside her window, the first light of dawn began again, slow and golden, spilling across the sky like a quiet promise renewed. And somewhere deep within that morning silence, a whisper floated, not from any human voice, but from the world itself, as if the earth exhaled in peace. "Good night, dear dreamer." And so, as the morning sun rose over the kingdom, Rapunzel finally rested, her dreams fulfilled, her heart free. The lanterns faded into daylight, and peace, like a soft blanket, covered the land. Now, dear dreamer, let your own eyes close, and let sleep find you, gently, completely, and without hurry. Until next time, may your dreams be kind and your mornings bright. Good night, dear dreamer. You've been listening to Whispers of the Night.